Welcome to Truth and Transparency. What is up, Karen Reed trial watchers? Look out. Come on in here. Let's talk about it. Yesterday, Lally dropping his commonwealth opposition to the defendant's post-trial motion to dismiss. So there it is. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you are hanging out, time of day. I also have the motion that they filed for the dismiss of those counts 1 and 2, or counts 1 and 3, because I got to point out some things, because Lally likes to get a little wordsy and try to say things that the defense didn't say. So come on in. Crack them open. It's 95 where I'm at. What's it where you guys are? Hot? It's hot. True. All right, I got all the jury notes here. So Bev went ahead and gave me all the jury notes. I hit her up. So we have all the jury notes. We have all the props ready to go. Speaking of props, how about Alec Baldwin dismissed? Boom. See ya. How about a judge just doing what she's supposed to do? Wow. Amazing. Amazing to see when people and judges aren't. That judge was pissed too. But that's for another day. Okay. So it's important in this little timeline, but I want to start by saying everybody knows that 4 jurors have come forward with a possible 5th coming forward and saying, hey, yeah, we were not guilty on the murder charge. And allegedly that 5th juror is the foreman. But it's been alleged that the foreman also said that it's been said that they said that she was guilty of manslaughter. So again, we'll get into that. But let's start with this motion. I'm going to go like this to make it as big as possible because you guys like to see, some of you guys that can't get it. And let me just back it out just a tad. But I want to point out that those counts with the addition to the 3 indictments, there was the 1 and 2 lessers. So that actually can be found at the bottom of page 1. The jury was instructed to consider 2 lesser included offenses to manslaughter while operating under the influence. And that first one, involuntary manslaughter in violation of GL. And then number 2, the motor vehicle homicide, OUI liquor, and negligence in violation of GL C90 24GA. Now, getting into the meat and potatoes right away, the defendant's motion states that the court's decision to declare a mistrial was sudden, brief, and unexpected, neither preceded nor accompanied by a discussion with counsel. Yet the defendant's motion and supporting affidavits of counsel inexplicably omit the full opportunity that the defendant was given to be heard and the defendant's consent to the mistrial. Now, I want to point out that that's not true. Alan Jackson is very specific when he says, this is where they talk about that. Let me. Okay. Alan Jackson's affidavit was to that specific act, which okay. this all had to do with the second or the last, obviously that last note. So it's right here. If you go and take a look, it says to this specific act, and the note was not presented to counsel for review. Rather, the court indicated the jury was at an impasse. Now, we're going to come back to this because it's what they cited, and it's a case that they cited. And from that case law, it has quotes in it. And then from there, it was that specific act with that specific letter, that note. And so Lally is trying to rope it all in here as all of it. And it's like, no, Alan Jackson has an issue in his affidavit and he states it to that last note. It was never shown. Whereas all the other ones, it was different procedure. But let's back up though. I have a question. I want to know if these jurors had to or knew what was being wrote on these letters. Because these notes, because I agree with the Commonwealth's position on the fact that these notes are, first of all, before there was the weekend break, this is all that was said in a simple note like this, beginning on Friday. I am writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Do you see that right there? A unanimous verdict. It's like they're just coming back with one verdict here. Okay. This is the letter that we should really be focusing on, if you want my opinion. This is to me what would be very simple. Because this should have had a lot of questions. Do they like? They're not just coming back with one verdict. There's 3 different counts. So you're going to have your verdict is there's 3 different counts. So this is interesting to me, but this is how simple it was. So at 12:15 on that Friday, June 28th, before they left for the weekend, where then somewhere, somehow, their letters and what they were writing the courts completely like changed. So the first letter, here it is. Can we get that cert report? Okay. And no, they're not getting it, right? All right. Then, second time, Bev told them that Bev asked them if they wanted to leave early. So it's not like they wrote a note technically, but the note came after Bev asked them if they wanted to leave. So this was after Bev asked if they wanted to go home. Can we leave at 3:30 p.m. to get on the bus by 4? Then this is what we see then on Friday. Okay. That's the number 3 note, and that's this in yellow. And that comes on Friday. Then on Friday, they asked to stay until 4:15. Then Friday, they asked to stay until 4:15. Okay. Then they go home. See, so look at this writing right here. This is that letter. Look at this letter. Look at this type of a letter. So by 4:15, okay, we couldn't come to any agreement, right? I should say agreements. Okay, because there's multiple things that are on the table here. It's not just, unless we're saying, not guilty across the board, then I guess you could say like, yeah, we're coming back with one verdict, which is not guilty to everything. But technically you could have a couple not guilties, a couple, guilties mixed in with a not guilty, whatever. So this right here is interesting to me, but look at the way that it's wrote. Okay. Now, the weekend then comes, and Saturday and Sunday pass. Then they're in the courtroom on Monday. Okay. And at that time, based on the first letter here, at that time, the court requested arguments from the Commonwealth and the defendant as to whether the jury had engaged in due and thorough deliberations. So they were heard. The Commonwealth responded that the jury had not had sufficient time in deliberation and requested that the jury be instructed to continue their deliberation. On the contrary, Attorney Yannetti argued, quote unquote, "We believe that there has been sufficient time," and advocated for the jury to be declared deadlocked and provided the Tui Rodriguez instructions. Now, I want to know if, in fact, because there was no the term deadlock, as you could see, was not used anywhere here, and he's not quoting Yannetti except for this portion right here, and he wants to put in the word deadlocked. Okay. Attorney Yannetti stated, now this is where he wants to quote him again, "The word exhaustive is the word that I think is operative here. Where I think what was the key word here is the word verdict." Okay. "I'm ready to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict." This is where I would have had issues. A unanimous verdict. Does the jury, Bev, based on that letter, it seems like the jury thinks that they're just, this is like an all or nothing. Like this verdict, like there's multiple counts here, and I guess you could say like multiple verdicts. Like, what is she on count 1? What is she on count 2? What is she on count 3? And then there's those lesser included. So I disagree with the saying that the key word here is exhaustive. And to me, the key words are here is reach a unanimous verdict. This is indicating that the jury is under the impression that they need to be unanimous across the board with everything. Okay? Because they are just saying the word verdict in their letter, not they're based on that language. I'd have a problem with it. I would say, okay, wait a second. Are they under the impression that they have to have, like, what if they have something for count 1 and count 2, or what if they have something for count, 1 and 3? What's up? So just want to point that out, that I would have been paying attention to that, and that word verdict versus, I think that right there you could have asked them some questions, but I would have put it on Bev to say, does the jury think that they have to have a verdict on all counts, and that's why this isn't going to go anywhere, because they may have verdicts on some of these counts? Now, they're communicating to the court that they've exhausted all manner of compromise, all manner of persuasion, and they're at an impasse. Now, instead of assuming that, I would have asked some questions. But that's the part that, people might be like, okay, well, so you're second guessing Yannetti or whatever. Yeah, whatever you want to say here, but that language just really would bother me, especially since we just had the whole big issue with the jurors' slips and everything before that. Okay. Now, this is where it's going to get absolutely crazy. So, this is a case where the jury has the legal instructions. They've only really asked one question, and that's true. So they've only really asked one question. Another thing there is to, like, why aren't they asking anything yet? They've only really asked one question, which was to try and get a report they were not allowed to get. So this cert report existed and they weren't allowed to get the cert report, or was there no report? Because that then confused me. Okay, because I just thought that O'Hara didn't do the report and that Tully did the cert report, right? So where the fuck is this cert report? And how was that not in evidence for them to review? Now, and I think the message has been received that the evidence is closed and they won't be getting anything more. Okay. They've been working essentially nonstop over the last 3-4 days. We're approaching a weekend. They didn't come back with this at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. They're at 12 o'clock and they have nowhere to turn. So our position is the jury should be read the Tui Rodriguez model instruction. And here to myself, they may have had nowhere to turn, but right there, is there a chance that they could say, well, did they come to any conclusions here? Are they at an impasse on all 3 counts? Are they under the impression that they have to have like, so, which, if you think about it, like logically, that would tell me if they're splitting hairs because they can't come, they've already thrown murder off the table, and now we're talking about lessers. Okay. I would have been asking that question because I would be thinking logically that they have to be in an impasse over other things, because I think that if they felt that she was guilty of murder, that it would have come back on everything as guilty, 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 right? So my question, and you could say I'm being critical, is was this a mistake right here at this opportunity of the defense team to not, that something else should have been stated than what was stated, if that makes sense. So obviously we know what happens there. What happens there is Bev agrees with the Commonwealth that there has not been enough time, and she does not do the Tui Rodriguez, and she sends them back. Okay? Because again, now, this is where it gets interesting for me. This is when the jury then says, we want to stay until 4:15 that same Friday. And so they stay until 4:15, and then nothing happens, and they go home, and then they have that weekend. And this is where everything changes in these jury notes. On Monday, July 1st, 2024, at approximately 10:45 a.m., which we were all shocked, the jury sent another note to the court stating, now think about it. Judge Canone, despite our commitment, so you would have just been in there for 1 hour and 45 minutes. 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I think that they, no doubt about it, on Friday, even before they wrote that note, I believe that they had already thrown off, because I've been wanting to try to pinpoint when Murder 2 was out of the picture. And I think that without a doubt, in my opinion, without a doubt, Murder 2 was thrown off the table when this letter was wrote. Because everything that they would have been debating is after 1 and 3 have already been tossed out, and now their whole debate and exhaustive measures came over count 2 and the lessers with count 2. That's what makes sense. And that's what would make sense with them writing the word just verdict, because they already in their mind have the other 2 verdicts. And that's where you can kind of now argue it. Okay. But this is where the exhaustive measures would have come, because this letter, in my opinion, so this is the first ever written, and this would have been Friday at 12:15. So they already had their mind made up on 1 and 3. And then the reason that this letter would be like this is because subconsciously, when that letter was being written, they already knew that there was one verdict out there that we were not on, which then come now I'll like come now to this point where we're at here, and here it is that they did throw out 1 and 3, and that they were only talking about count 2. So I believe that they were on the whole murder is out, okay, early on, and that this letter almost basically seals that deal for me, and if they're using exhaustive, then that means they did closings on Tuesday, so they only basically had it then after lunch for just a little bit. So you're looking at I believe that murder 2 was off, when they say off the table, that they were then deliberating that count 2 Wednesday, Thursday, and then this note gets put in at 12:15 on Friday. So all of the time that they would have been there on Wednesday and Thursday was dedicated to count 2. That's what makes sense when you want to go in chronological order and based off of the wording. Now this letter is completely fucking different. That's why I want to know if the jury all were looking at each other like, wait a second, you're putting that letter in. You can't put that letter in. Judge Canone, despite our commitment to the duty entrusted in us, we find ourselves deeply divided. And now think about them just talking about count 2, because there is no deeply division on count 1 or 3. So now looking at this, the way that you would only be able to write this letter and everybody in that room agree that you can write this letter is because this is only about count 2. Otherwise, there would be no way that those jurors who they reached out to the defense, they would never in their fucking minds ever agree that this letter be sent out, because it doesn't make any sense that it would. Because, okay, it makes sense if they've already decided on those 2 other counts and that they've been thrown off the table and that you're deciding on 1. Okay. And then this makes sense. And then you're explaining it to people that, no, this just has to do with count 2. So your foreman who wrote this letter up and basically got everybody to approve that this letter be sent, explained it that this is only to do about count 2. Well, then why aren't you putting it on there? Because, so let me read this then. Judge Canone, despite our commitment to the duty entrusted in us, we find ourselves deeply divided by fundamental differences in our opinions and state of mind. State of mind? Like when I saw those words, like what? The divergence in our views are not rooted in a lack of understanding or effort, but deeply held convictions that each of us carry, ultimately leading to a point where consensus is unattainable. And in their minds, the jurors that would have approved this, it's like, yes, on count 2. Okay? Because remember, they were never allowed to discuss and tell anybody that, like, what you've come to. We recognize the weight of this admission and the implication it holds. Now, that letter versus this letter, okay. Why did they feel the need to write all of that? Why not just write this? I'm writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict on 1 of the counts. The other 2 counts have been reached unanimous. If this was the way that you wrote the first letter, why wouldn't you be telling the judge? You're not telling them how you did anything, but you are letting them know this is where we're at. What would you like us to do? We are still at an impasse with one of the counts, but we have unanimously decided 2 of those 3 counts. So in a room with these educated people, you take this note and you basically replicate it, right? Except you add, like I just said at the bottom, you're going to then clearly state that maybe we weren't clear, but saying we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict, that tells me that the jury's confused because they did reach a unanimous verdict on counts. But they're under the impression that you have to reach a unanimous verdict on everything. And that's why they're calling it a verdict versus a verdict on count 1, a verdict on count 2, a verdict on count 3. But why did they switch up from the simple little letter to then writing this, okay? And then following the receipt of that note, the court again inquired of the Commonwealth and the defendant. So this is where you're creating consistency on how you did things. So Bev, after the first note, asked them. Then Bev, after the second note, asked Commonwealth and the defense, right? Okay. So you're creating that consistent way of doing something. And again, the Commonwealth argued that although the jury had been deliberating for approximately 22 hours, given the length of the trial and number of, but here you go. But, Yannetti, again, sought a Tui Rodriguez instruction stating that the jury has come back twice, indicating essentially that they're hopelessly deadlocked. Now, again, I have no idea why he was saying hopelessly deadlocked. All right, because maybe that's just a phrase, but that's not what the letter said. Okay, that those words just weren't used. They said they've been over all the evidence at this time. They say they have fundamental disagreements about what the evidence means. It's a matter of opinion. It's not a matter of lack of understanding. The court found that at this point, the jury had engaged in due and thorough deliberations, noting that this has been an extraordinary jury. What? The court indicated it had never seen a note like this, reporting to be at an impasse. Exactly, Bev. I agree with you. And here, I don't think Bev has truly, she said it. I remember her saying it. All of you guys should remember her saying it. But Bev said that she had never seen a note like this. And I agree. I agree because it makes no sense. Just like this one, though. Okay. But it's so different. This language, so simple, like boom, here you go. It went from this to then after the weekend where people could have been looking things up. People could have sought out to talk to somebody, but then all of a sudden the foreman doesn't think to say, okay, we wrote what we wrote. Let's inform them, or should we ask if we can inform them if we've come to any decisions? But at the very least, like, why aren't you asking that question? But to go and write this stuff, this is wild shit. Talking about state of mind, I agree with Bev. What the hell is that note about? It may be because it was such a wild of a note that Bev should have then inquired more about it. But if you go into the minds of the jurors back then, the note actually makes sense to them because of one reason. Because it makes sense to them. Because to them, they already had the two, we already had count 1 and 3 handled way before we wrote the first note. And that's why I believe that the note was written and where it said these words, that we've been unable to reach a unanimous verdict, singular. And that would be on count 2. Because in their minds, when they wrote the letter, they've already, like, we're going to be able to talk because they're going to ask us the questions of this. Because somebody said in that jury room, had to have said, you guys, they all ask us to come out and then we stand up and they say, have you reached a verdict? Have you been able to reach a verdict in this case? Your Honor, we were unable to reach a verdict on count 2, but we were able to reach a verdict on counts 1 and 3. Somebody in that room has to be saying that we're going to have a chance to say those words, right? Because no way in hell is that jury, okay, is all sitting in a room and letting somebody then write this letter, because this letter clearly makes it seem that you guys haven't decided on dick. Okay. I mean, I agree with the Commonwealth here. This letter and what they're writing here, this is like, what the hell? So then they give the Tui Rodriguez, okay? Then at approximately 11 o'clock, that's when the Tui Rodriguez was issued. And then 2:30. So that happened at 10:30, now at 2:30. And if they took their hour lunch from 1 to 2 and didn't talk about the case, so think about that then. The jury sent a final note to the court, which is interesting. Despite our rigorous efforts, we continue to find ourselves at an impasse. Our perspectives on the evidence are starkly divided. That means what you think the evidence means and what I think the evidence means. We're like the conclusion of it. Some members of the jury firmly believe that the evidence surpasses the burden of proof establishing the elements of the charges. See how it says S? Beyond reasonable doubt. Conversely, others find the evidence fails to meet this standard, okay, and does not sufficiently establish the necessary elements of the charges. The deep division is not due to a lack of effort or diligence, but rather a sincere adherence to our individual principles and moral convictions. He knew that if he wrote this word right here, moral, he knew the Massachusetts state law. The person that was writing these letters these jurors need to ask the person that was writing these letters and needs to start talking and speaking out on this, because this shit, you don't write a letter like you did, a note, and then the next two that come after a weekend break come back like this. To continue to deliberate would be futile and only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. And guess what's about to come out? And it has to come out. Somebody's gonna have to talk about it. And we just have to ask ourselves this one question, which is, when you guys wrote this note, which was the simplest, when you guys wrote this note, had you thrown off the table counts 1 and 3, number one? If so, do you have a roundabout ballpark? If anybody was taking notes in there, because maybe one day they want to write a book, when you actually threw off the table 1 and 3? Because everything that these affidavits that the defense has brought forward and what these jurors are saying are so, like, you would never let a letter like this through. There is no way that I would be like, I would raise my hand at big, with all due respect, you're not fucking turning that letter in. Because that letter makes it seem like we haven't come to any conclusions on anything. There is no way you're putting that letter in. So how did this foreman get it so that these jurors, now you want to talk about why people were crying? This is why they were crying. I think it has everything to do about these damn letters. These damn letters that were written to the courts. I agree with Bev. What the fuck is this? But if you've already thrown murder 2 off the table, and so count 1 and 3 are off the table, these letters do not in any way, shape, or form back that at all. So I want to know how the foreman was able to get the rest of the jurors in that room to say, yep, turn that letter in. Yep, turn that letter in. And the only way that you're going to possibly convince me of that is to say, listen, we are not allowed to say that we've come to that. And then I'm going to say, you know what? How about this? We ask them. Let's ask the courts if we can say whether we came to a conclusion. I'm not going to, screw you. But he's probably like, listen, I'm a cop. I did this shit for all this long. This is what Massachusetts state law is, blah, 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 or this is this, or this is that, but somebody is going to have to come forward and literally say that we wrote these letters the way that we did, because in our minds, the only thing that we were debating was count 2. Like, that's going to have to be said in order for this to ever move and for you to and I think that people are going to come out and say that, but who would ever write letters like this? How can you blame the position literally of the prosecution right now? These are the letters that they were writing. Why were you writing these letters? Who wrote these letters? Why was this ever agreed to? Okay. But right when he put the word moral in there, to continue to deliberate would be fruitful and only serve to force us to compromise those deeply held beliefs. Now, what you're going to be able to argue is that how everything played out. When you got that letter, so when Bev got that letter, she didn't do what she always did, which was get the letter, you have the lawyers in there with just the lawyers, you get the letter, you read it, and then you say, Mr. Unetti and Mr. Jackson, what do you have to say? Mr. Lally, what do you have to say? That did not happen. And that is what Alan Jackson is talking about. We didn't have a chance to be heard. Because of the precedent that she set in the case, like here, they came back with a letter before they came back with the letter. Okay. They came back with this letter. We were all heard each time. And then this one, she doesn't read the letter. She just says the jury's at an impasse. Then she calls in both parties as well as the jury, then reads the letter in front of the jury, which is different than she's ever done for all the other letters. She reads that letter in front of the jury and then doesn't say, Mr. Unetti and Mr. Jackson, Lally, what do you guys have to say? That's the part that was skipped, as well as the way that it was handled. And she just read the letter and then she just says, I'm not going to, right here, I'm not going to force you to compromise. She basically says, I'm not going to do that. And your duties are concluded and I'm going to, call this a mistrial. Following receipt of that note, the court discharged the jury and declared a mistrial. The representations made in counsel's affidavits have no legal bearing on the mistrial, as the jury did not reach any verdicts, partial or otherwise. Now, the jurors are going to have to out that foreman and say, We only agreed to those letters being written because, like, we already knew we had these verdicts and we were going to have a chance to speak on those. And like, they're going to have to move blame on this because this is absolutely fucking crazy. Because these affidavits that then come out and they're saying, we were unanimously on this. Like, if there's a juror in there purposely trying to confuse other jurors, what would that be considered? Nancy, happy Saturday. Cheers. Nancy's a star. Nancy S stands for star. Nancy's just a star here. You guys, this is wild. This is absolutely wild because, jury tampering is exactly what it's called. Exactly. And these letters, I literally racked my brain for, I couldn't even tell you how long, because I'm like, what? I was like, I'm telling you, there's no way that these jurors come forward with these affidavits or like, talk and say all this stuff and say that they're going to testify. They just don't want to be outed who they are because basically they don't want to be like their lives ruined. Understand. But why in the world would they ever allow these letters to be turned in unless that's why they were fighting and crying? But they said that there was no fighting and crying. Maybe that woman was just having hot flashes. Who knows? But I want to know, and we should all be asking ourselves, why the hell these letters were written the way that they were written? Because the first one makes all the sense in the world to me, right? As to where their heads were. Like, well, let's just write the word verdict, and then they're going to tell us that, wait, you guys, there's just not one verdict. Okay, there's, you can find her guilty of count one. You can find her not guilty here. You can do that. But that letter, that first note, totally it's so obvious when they wrote the word just verdict, singular. And but why that letter completely changed in the type of language and just went into it is astonishing to me. And why anybody in that room would be like, yeah, you can turn that in. No, it makes it seem like we haven't reached a verdict on anything. And then people in that jury deliberating room were saying, well, yeah, we have to reach it on a unanimous decision. So it's fine, actually, the way that it says it. But I get what you're saying, because we have thrown out counts 1 and 3. So then you're talking about confusion. But those letters, the last two, there's no confusion here. It makes it seem like we haven't decided shit. And now this all goes on the foreman. This all goes on who fucking wrote those letters. And that's what needs to be talked about. Because then what Lally is saying and how he's defending his position is that the representations made in counsel's affidavits have no legal bearing on the mistrial, as the jury did not reach any verdicts, partially or otherwise. And yes, they have, right? But he wants to cite this case, and it says that verdicts must be reported in open court. Did they have a chance to report their verdict in open court? Verdicts must be reported in open court. This would tell me the jury's going to have to say, we were not given an opportunity to speak in open court. Okay. And we were told by our foreman that we would be, that they were going to then ask us the questions out loud in the courtroom, and that we will be able to clear this up when she says, have you reached a verdict? And we can say, Your Honor, we've been able to come to a unanimous decision on counts 1 and 3, but not 2. There would have to be some type of agreement, because otherwise, why are you writing those letters? Scott says, "Hi peeps, I love how you pour over documents on this channel. It was so nice to meet you outside of trial a few weeks ago." Oh yes, oh yay, you're Scott. What's up? Cheers, buddy. Hell yeah, hell yeah. Well, I think it's important to break it down. Plus, some people that are in the different countries, you know, I didn't realize this until I started doing YouTube, that they're unable to like see some of the stuff that we're able to see. And so when I use Hector the projector and I like me sharing even somebody's like, you know, a video, they still like they can't see stuff like that. But when I use Hector, they can actually get stuff that they can't get otherwise. But yeah, I didn't realize, you know, some of those other countries have certain bans and blah blah. So so I believe the only way that these letters could be written, and you would have to be telling me that no, we're going to be able to speak on, like, we couldn't come to unanimous decision because we have to have all of them, right? So therefore we haven't. But when she asks if we've come to a decision on any of them, then we say yes. Then we say yes. And then she's going to ask us on what? And I'm going to say we've come to a decision on count 1 and count 3, but we are unable to come to a decision on count 2. Even still, I'm telling you, but even still, do I think that you could win over the jury to say, okay, yeah, that makes sense? Because we weren't allowed to say, anything, right? I'm still going to be that person there to say, no, why don't we tell her this? We don't have to tell her what we've come to. Or if you're not going to agree with me on that, then we're going to ask her. We're going to say, we are unclear. Do you need us to come to an agreement on all 3 of them, you know, prior? We're just going to ask questions. We're going to ask questions. That's the whole purpose, is to ask the courts the questions, not give statements. This is a statement. They released a press statement, okay? And you have to ask yourself, why? Why the fuck did they do that? These letters, why? Something happened over the weekend, y'all. I'm telling you. It looked like a kindergartner wrote the first letter, and then the next 2 letters come out looking like, you know, we're over here about to get sued or some shit, like that we have to have some profound language and write a bunch of crazy shit because you guys are going to come for us. They're going to come for us. But why those 2 letters? They don't make any sense, you guys. Those letters are seriously baffling after hearing what jurors A, B, C, and D said. Absolutely baffling. You couldn't pay me $1 million to let you put this shit in. I would say absolutely not. You're not fucking turning in that letter. I don't care if you're the foreman. Go fuck yourself. We're going to unanimously agree on what letter goes to her. And that ain't going because I'm already saying no. So draw up another one. Like, that's going to be me. And they're going to be like, either they love this crazy bitch Lana, or they're going to be like, you know, she just couldn't agree on anything. It's just like, no, this is, you know, that time that you're just like way too wordy that you're like, it's word. This is crap. This is absolute fucking crap. But this shit doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And you just go back to the first, but it does if you're in the minds of the jurors who think that this only pertains to count 2. That's the only way that this would come out and make a damn ounce of sense, is if someone says, yeah, those 2 last freaking notes that we sent on Monday after the weekend, you know, it was because those 2 notes strictly were about count 2. because we already decided count 1 and 3 before we even put in the Friday one, that Friday note, because we had count 1 and 3 off the table like so quickly, because count 3 kind of goes. The only reason count 3 is there is because of count 1. So if you're going not guilty on count 1, then she couldn't have knowingly hit him or purposely hit him and left the scene of the crime, because she didn't know that there was even a crime that had occurred. So if you're going not guilty on count 1, it's going to be a not guilty on count 3. That's what's so easy. Okay. And it would make all the sense in the world why they use the term verdict versus verdicts. Okay. Now, moving on to this part, which is the only verdict, so he's citing some case law here, Lally. The only verdict which can be received and regarded as a complete and valid verdict of a jury upon which a judgment can be rendered is an open and public verdict. So what would happen, since they're all in a group text, is if these jurors in the group text were like, okay, it needs to be an open, these verdicts must be like an open and public verdict. Well, let's all go stand on the court steps and say, listen, we voted on Thursday. We knew actually on Wednesday. We threw 1 and 3 off the table. Murder was off the table. So everything that we were deliberating was count 2 after that point. Our first letter states that we just said the word verdict because we were under the impression that we had to have one verdict. That's why we wrote the word verdict. That's why every letter that went after it, after that first one, had to do with that specific count 2. We were expecting to be heard in open court. When she would have asked after she read that, she was going to ask us, is this your foreman? Is this your is this what you all say? Okay. And that never happened because that foreman's going to have to say, that's when I was going to be saying, Your Honor, we've reached a conclusion on counts 1 and 3. And the only thing that we've been going back and forth on and exhausting ourselves with is count 2 and the lessers. Somebody's going to have to clear this up. And the only people that can clear it up are the jurors. And so those people that came forward and want to go through intermediate, that's not going to work. That's not going to cut it. All right. You're going to have to go to they're all in a group text. All of you guys meet at the same time, go down to that courthouse. And because the way that the law works, these defense attorneys putting in affidavits, and then here you have literally the guy that couldn't get out sentences quick enough. He's calling you guys all liars. He's calling the defense liars. He's calling the defense saying this is all sensationalism. What? Phone records won't lie. And guess what? If anybody on the defense has lied, they should be in trouble for it. It is not enough to show that the jury may have agreed on some issues at some time. If that limited showing were to control uncertainties would be invited. So again, I think that the jurors need to read this. Okay. The hearsay comments and juror statements about what happened are legally irrelevant, as the jury failed to reach any verdicts. And I'm sorry, but you're going to have to put this on your foreman, because he wrote those letters. And what should have come out in those letters is that you did reach verdicts on certain counts. And somebody told you guys that you couldn't do that. And somebody's going to have to come forward and fucking say that. Otherwise, Otherwise, the jurors can sit with this for the rest of their lives because they're a bunch of fucking morons. Because you let those letters go out. The first letter was perfect because the first letter showed, and I think the defense missed it. I think that they should have been paying attention to that letter. I mean, if I would have actually seen the letter in written form, I immediately saw it. I'm like, verdict? They're not coming back with a verdict. They're coming back with three verdicts. There's 3 counts. This is unbelievable. That letter tells you everything. Why did they think that they were only coming back with a verdict? We have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict. What the fuck does that mean? This tells me that they are confused. This was the first simple letter. And this was on Friday. Look at this, Friday. And then over the weekend, something happened. And then the foreman came in and said, got these people in this in this deliberating room to let him write those type of letters. And that blows me away. That blows me away because those letters imply that we have not come to any conclusion on anything and that we are basically all fucking crazy because we're talking about state of mind and you're talking about, no, we're not putting this all in writing. Why are we writing that? Listen, if any one of those people told anybody over the weekend that murder was off the table, counts 1 and 3 were off the table, and the only thing, like, they need to find out if they were, I believe they were off the table before they wrote that letter, and if that got relayed in any type of way, because it didn't make sense that Bev all of a sudden changed the way she did the last letter, preventing it coming out about the not guilties on count 1 and 3. But and remember, Ashley Banfield came out and said they had a source and they said that murder was off the table right away. And lo and behold, she was right. Her source was right. So I would love to know who Ashley Banfield's source was when she reported that way early on during deliberating. The jurors just need to come together here truly after they would have read this motion, this response by the Commonwealth and say, wait a second. We want to be heard because of what we read. And you guys said that there was no better jury. There's not going to be better people to decide this case, that we should be deciding this case. We've heard everything, blah, blah, blah. We were picked, yada, yada. We didn't disagree. We agreed with that. Okay. We were supposed to be heard. Those letters were just letters to the court, updating them on shit, right? How can those letters alone? You didn't ask us anything. We didn't speak in open court, right? Those letters should have never been written the way they were. My question is to everybody is, why did the foreman want to write letters like that? And why did y'all let him write letters like that? Now, moving on to this next page. In Bluford, the jury sent a note to the court indicating they were hopelessly deadlocked. They never sent a note like that to the courts. And the court asked the foreperson to disclose the jury's votes on the 3 charges. The foreperson reported, so think about this. Okay. If you're telling us in a jury room that, listen, after we come with this letter is just to get us back in front of her, okay? She's going to ask us something, and then we'll be able to speak on it, right? That's the only way that this is possible, man. But, so in this case, first-degree murder, manslaughter, and negligent homicide. The foreperson reported the jury unanimously agreed the defendant was not guilty of murder, but was deadlocked on manslaughter and had not voted on negligent homicide. The court gave the jury an Allen instruction, akin to the Tui Rodriguez instruction, that emphasized the importance of reaching a verdict and instructed the jury to continue. What the fuck are you talking about, reaching a verdict? See, Allen verse. After a half hour, the jury reported that they had not reached a verdict and a mistrial was declared. If somebody knew of this, this is almost kind of exactly what happened, but without saying that we've reached a verdict, okay? The United States Supreme Court rebuffed the defendant's claim that the jury acquitted him of murder, as the foreperson's report was not a final verdict because the jury had continued to deliberate. But guess what? The jury didn't continue to deliberate. And instead, the jury was never asked anything, right? There was no continuation to deliberate. And more importantly, gave an indication that they were still unanimous on the murder charge. Excuse me? The United States Supreme Court emphasized that when jurors engage in discussions about the circumstances of the crime, it often causes one to rethink their stance on a greater offense and revisit a prior vote. Now, I think this is why I believe what I'm saying and what I said in the beginning is so fucking important. And it goes back to the first letter, which is the jury coming back and saying, listen, this letter right here, we wrote this letter. The first one that you guys got on Friday, we wrote this after we had already thrown out counts 1 and 3. Okay. Everybody would have to be saying that. And we threw counts 1 and 3 out so early on that's why we used, that's why we had come back, because we had just spent all of our time solely on count 2 and the lessers. Okay. And that's why, hence why we said a unanimous verdict versus a unanimous verdict on all the counts. And then the rest of our letters strictly pertained to count 2. And the only reason that we let that fucking asshole write those letters. The very object of the jury system, after all, is to secure a single juror's change of mind is all it takes to require the jury to reconsider a greater offense. And this Tui Rodriguez, this is when they came back, because it was after the language of the Tui Rodriguez is when they were saying that you want us to see other people's point of views. You want us to, you know, is mine reasonable? Is yours reasonable? That's the shit that they couldn't get around with the whole count two and the lessers. And you're dealing with DUIs. You're dealing with, like, the jury's notes were not ambiguous. They were very just, I agree. I agree with Lally here. I totally fucking agree. Well, the last two letters on Monday, the Monday letters. Deeply divided by fundamental differences in our opinions and state of mind. You guys, I'm telling you, what the fuck were they writing? Why were they writing this? Why did anybody agree that these letters would be... Wouldn't you raise your hand and be like, hey, I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist here, but I'm reading these letters, and this letter makes it seem like that this is as a whole, meaning that murder 2 and which is count 1 and then count 3, that's like we're saying everything here. Should we be writing these letters? Should we be writing these letters? Should we be writing this? I mean, why are we writing? Why? We don't have to say any of this shit. Why are we? Why are we all agreeing that this should be sent to the court? And I don't think they all were in agreement that this should be sent to the court. You guys, take murder, take trial out. Say this is just an English class, okay? Or this is just life. Why the hell would you ever write this and think that we're going to think, whoever reads this is going to think that this has nothing to do with count 1 or count 3? Because where does it say that it doesn't have anything to do with count 1? If you were to write this, a paper, and for me to understand your position on where everything is, you could not possibly write this to me and for me to say, oh, duh, this is only to do with count 2. So how in the world did this get past everybody to agree to say, send this to the judge? Send this to the judge. See, now look at them. Emphasis on plural. I want to put emphasis on singular. The jury consistently indicated that their impasse was not due to a lack of understanding of the law. But that's wild because I'm not supposed to understand the law. Like, you guys determine the law. Or the charges. But a profound, deeply held convictions. Exactly. And Lally is arguing his case. It's like it was set up for Lally to argue this. This is wild to me. Ultimately leading to a point where consensus is unattainable. Yes, we all read those letters, and nobody could have read those letters and thought to themselves, oh my God, this only has to do with one of the counts. And if you're out there saying to yourself, yeah, that's what I thought, well, then you're a liar. No, we all heard those letters being read, and none of us thought that anything was decided upon. The jury's notes did not indicate agreement or acquittal on any of the charges. He's right, and so why not? So he's basically saying, like, why the fuck didn't y'all write that? Here's Lally making a very, very good point, which is the jury's notes, and I just hate, the foreman. The jury's notes did not indicate agreement or acquittal on any of the charges, but I would argue that the first note, 100%, totally different than the other two. Rather, it was evident that the jury was unable to agree on any charges due to their sincere adherence to their individual principles and moral convictions. Dude, this foreman, whoever wrote this letter, can go fuck themselves. And every juror that's out there that had put in and talked and said that this is so not right. And well, then if it's so not right, then there are ways to make it right, but it's going to be you doing something about it. And it ain't going to be through confidential informants. It's going to be you actually having the fucking cahoons, because the words that were in this letter, I said it, you guys shouldn't have been on the jury if you had all these, issues, state of mind and bullshit. They didn't prove their fucking case. Period. Could that have reasonably happened? Yes. Could that? All these things could have fucking happened, which tells me we don't know what happened, and therefore we are going to acquit because we have no choice, because that's the law. It's called not guilty by reasons of reasonable doubt. It's what it is. It's but this is what they're all hiding behind, and that's what the foreman wrote. Moral. Wait, I could actually go ahead and agree with you. There's all this reasonable doubt, but I can't morally do it, because then I don't believe that any of these cops planted evidence. So then the evidence tells me that she hit him, because how did the tail light get there? That's my moral hangup, and therefore I am voting guilty for manslaughter. That's what's happening. That's what happened in that room, and he hid behind the whole moral thing. My moral issues trump reasonable doubt. And that's insanity to me, because you had no business in being on the jury. If you felt that, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that the evidence was going to be so what? But that person clearly wasn't being reasonable, because it's about this. Could it have been planted? Yes. How about the ARCA guys? They're saying that there is no way that vehicle caused that damage to John. If so, where are all the bruisings? The people that truly were voting to convict on manslaughter, or these lessers, God, they truly have a lot to I can't process people's brains like that, because I'm being unbiased when I say there's all these possibilities. And because of that, Jen McCabe wouldn't be found guilty. Brian Albert, Colin Albert, Chris Albert. Nobody should ever be found guilty of any charge in this case, because of the fuckerage in the case alone made it so that the evidence is not clear and convincing towards anybody. That's how one would say it. If I was on the jury for any of those other people, I'd be voting not guilty. Okay. Sorry. That's how it, do I think that Jen McCabe made the Google search? I don't know. I didn't like Green's testimony. I thought Green's testimony, when he went ahead and said that, I just thought that he didn't stick to his, I wasn't sold on it. So therefore, no, I don't know if she made the Google search. But it's definitely there. I see something that's there. And now you could tell me that there's a flaw in the Cellbrite. And it really wasn't Green's fault. It was how anybody could interpret it that way. So if you don't want us to interpret it that way, then you're going to have to do something because there's a glitch. That's not on him. That's just, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be able to, I'd have to give doubt in it. I don't know. But now, do I believe that Jen, based off of Jen McCabe's phone data with like the deletions and what she said in the 911 call, when you take the totality of, do I think that John O'Keefe went into that house? Abso-fucking-lutely. Do I think John O'Keefe went into that house? 100%. But I don't know who killed John O'Keefe. But he went into that house. 100% he went in that house. But I wouldn't be able to say that, Calvin Albert hit him, or Brian Albert hit him, or Higgins hit him. I don't know. Maybe if those people's phone records, because if all of those people were actually on trial, we would have all of their records, right? Maybe more stuff would come out, but I 100% would be able to sit here and say that I believe beyond any reasonable doubt that John O'Keefe went into that house based off of his data. I believe in that data. And that has nothing to do with my morals. And then I believe that Karen got home at John's place at 12:36. Like, she was on the Wi-Fi. I believe that. Just like I believe in the data of John's, all of John's movements, because I would have been comparing John's movements from earlier in the day. And anytime when he got up in the morning, did he register a flight of steps? So it was accurate then, so how I would have defended some things are different than how they did it. But their job wasn't, I think their job was a little bit more to prove that the accuracy and the data with the Apple stuff was on point. And so that's why I believe that they owed it to talk about that more, the defense. But I believe with beyond any reasonable doubt that John O'Keefe walked into that home, or you're going to have to sit here and say that somebody took John's phone into that home and registered the 3 stops. But any way you slice and dice it, then John's phone made it into that house. And his phone made it into that house between 12:21 and 22 seconds and 12:24 because it was up and down. So, but I want to know if it's ever going to come out, and we're ever going to talk about who agreed and who didn't agree to that these letters were put in. What the fuck? These letters are the demise. Like, this is, but it's par for this court. Like, it's par for the course of this trial, this case. But I want one of those jurors to come forward and say, listen, the only time we argued was when we had to put those letters in and what was in those letters. And I'll just fucking fall off my chair because that's what should come out. Contrary to representations made in the defendant's motion and supporting affidavits, the defendant advocated for and consented to a mistrial. I only saw the stuff talking about that a Tui Rodriguez should have been, issued. So that's interesting to me. As she had adequate opportunities to object and instead remained silent, which removes any double jeopardy bar to retry. I think that they had that opportunity on Friday. Friday, June 28th was a huge day. I wouldn't have went right into the whole, I think we should have a Tui Rodriguez. I think that I would have been asking questions based on the juror's question, or the juror's statement, rather. They weren't asking a question. They were stating something, and they're under the impression they have to come back with a verdict. Do they understand that do they have any, or do they have any, are they unanimous on anything? Are we allowed to ask them that? I don't know. I would have tried to get something out of them with that, because it would play to the defense's, if they're arguing about lessers, we can get on the record that murder's off the table. And why wouldn't we want them to come to a decision about that? Or why wouldn't we want that to be made on the record that we've come to the conclusion on count 1 and 3? Or if you want to play even like crazy more, like, can we ask them if it's about the jury slips? Are they confused about the jury slips? Oh, shit. But I'm sorry, but I'm heated at the jury for these letters. I am pissed. Absolutely pissed at these letters. Because these letters should have never made it through and into the court based on these affidavits, right? Based on these affidavits. How do those type of letters get in there? I agree with Lally here. During her full opportunities to be heard on June 28th, just this day, June 28th, they were able to be heard, okay? And July 1st, now he wants to say that at no time did any of the defendants' 3 counsel, so he said, hey, you, between 3 of y'all couldn't come up with like, hey, something's off here. Request inquire as to what charge or charges the jury was deadlocked on. I agree with Lally there. I agree. And I think it only would have played in, I mean, maybe they were afraid to ask because, oh, what if they found her guilty on something? You know, do we want to play? Or are we rolling the dice here to say, okay, let's not ask this question because maybe like, but I don't think that could possibly work that way. If you found her guilty of murder, guys, okay, it would have been guilty on everything. She's guilty across the board. There's none of this crap. So to me, I would be saying like that logically doesn't make sense as to that they'd be deadlocked, but yet we're going to find out that they're not deadlocked on murder. How would you be deadlocked on? What are you talking about? So, but if I thought that there's no way that they're finding her guilty of murder, right? Let's ask some questions. But think about this. If the jury just would have done their fucking job and when they would have come out to say, hey, we unanimously can't come to a decision on count 2, but we have come to a decision unanimously on counts 1 and 3. Not sure if this means we're at an impasse or whatever the verbiage is because we've never done this before, but we are just being honest, sign the jury. Because this is about John O'Keefe, right? This isn't about Karen Reed, right? That's how the jury should be looking at it. This isn't about who the defendant is, who's her lawyer, who the prosecution, who is prosecuting the case. This is about the evidence and being making sure that justice, appropriate justice, could possibly happen for the person that's the victim, right? So we're trying to get it right here for the victim. Yes, we're trying to get it right here for obviously the defendant as well. And that would only make it so therefore we want to ask questions if we don't know, and we want to state the obvious if there's obvious. You know, like it, and I just feel like the jury totally blew it. You guys, I'm sorry, but like and I can say that and know that I'm right because there's no way that those type of letters go out and then literally in 24 hours, these type of affidavits are being written. Like, what? No way. I don't think they had been given the chance. I think that everything that took place then on July 1st with the second part, after the first letter had come back, they were heard after that. But when the second letter happened, she switched it up on how she did everything. So I totally disagree with what he's saying. You cannot add this day in. Rather, the defendant was quick to request a Tui Rodriguez instruction that at the first opportunity, indicating a belief based on the clear and obvious language of the jury's note and of the notes. No, but they asked for the Tui Rodriguez after the first note, you dumbass. So like, this is wrong. Like what he's saying in here and how he's trying to like balloon it, wrong. That's not. He's going hard at Yannetti. In this. that is stated by Attorney Yannetti, the jury was hopelessly deadlocked, had exhausted all manner of compromise, and was engaged in fundamental disagreements of what the evidence means. That is not what he said the first time around, though. Furthermore, following the discharge of the jury, the court engaged the Commonwealth and defendant in discussions about choosing dates. So look at this. This is then what he brings up. We're all sitting there to talk about a status conference and what dates people are available. And so right there, he's saying, now y'all had another chance when we're talking about for scheduling a retry. At no time during that hearing did the defendant object or indicate displeasure with the mistrial. The mistrial was also supported, and again, he's talking about case law. Bev's going to have the final say. This is Lally's position, guys. This is Lally's position. The court engaged in considerable efforts and sent the jury back to deliberate 2 times. Except for one thing, Lally, the court engaged in considerable efforts, but not consistent practices. So I would be arguing of the consistent practices that were not. Okay, the consistent practices with the jury. Bev was not consistent with the jury. That last time, it wasn't read out loud. It wasn't asked, okay, Commonwealth, what do you want to say? Defense team, what do you guys want to say? Okay, and then, all right, well, after hearing what you said, okay, I will, I'll bring the jury in and I'll ask them if they've come to any, so it was done differently. I had sent them back to deliberate 2 times following notes that they were at an impasse. And in addition to finding that the jury had engaged in due and thorough deliberations and providing the 2 Rodriguez instruction, at the request of the defendant and to her satisfaction, during deliberations, the court amended the verdict slips to depict clearly the lesser included offenses and provided the jury a supplement instruction on how to consider lesser included offenses. And so Lally is saying, like, we even did this for y'all. Okay. Bev intentionally made things ambiguous and confusing, in my opinion. Yeah, according to Lally, she was again, he's going to cite case law there. The defendant claims that the judge should have inquired of the jury. Hold no merit, as nothing in our case law require the judge to make either inquiry whether there was reasonable probability of a unanimous verdict or if the jury would consent to further deliberation. As a matter of course, and the circumstances before the judge did not necessitate either inquiry. So he's basically saying Bev did not have to do that, doesn't nowhere state that she has to do that, and it's not part of anything that we deal with. And so could Bev have done it? Sure. But is there anywhere out there that says that Bev has to do that? And the answer is no. The final note from the foreperson unequivocally, you see how he's like, his whole freaking argument is about these notes. And that's why they're so important. And that's why I have a huge problem with it. Because the person that wrote these notes, I feel like, knew that. I feel like the person that wrote these notes knew what they were doing. And prove me wrong, Foreman, by coming out and saying why you wrote the letters and saying it was, just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. The final note from the foreperson unequivocally stated that the jury was unable to come to a unanimous decision. And that's exactly what the freaking note says. So then, how in the world are people in that room like, yeah, turn that in. That's great to me. Oh my God, yep, that's exactly, yep, turn in. I would have said to look at this and be like, wait a second. She's going to think that we haven't come to any conclusions on anything, on any of the counts. I have a problem with that because this note is misleading because it's exactly what the note says. So I'm not okay with this note unless in this note we put that we've come to a unanimous decision on count 1 and count 3, and then you can write all of the shit that you want, and you're going to put it about count 2 and in the lessers. That's what's going to happen. But I personally believe that none of that is needed, and we're going to say that we've come to a conclusion on count 1 and count 3, and that we are still at an impasse on count 2, period. We turn in. If they want more, if they want to ask those questions, then they can ask those questions. Then they're going to tell us, well, it's all or nothing because some of us think that and some of us don't. But by us stating that, then it is no way, shape, or form like that's the truth. We're being transparent without revealing what our verdict for each of those counts is. And how anybody in that room could have been like, Lana, you're crazy. I want to go with this letter over here. I would have looked at you like I said, well, we can agree to disagree because I'm gonna keep it respectful, but like this is a lie. This note is a lie. So I can't fault Lally for what he's saying here, but it's almost like he was handed exactly how like he's using these letters, their own words against them. They were following Bev's instructions. They're going to have to say that. Someone's going to have to say it because I don't see how they were following Bev's instructions. They're going to have to point that out, and they're going to have to say that. Because Bev's instructions do not say to write me a note like this and then tell me in the note that, in quotes, you're unable to come to a unanimous decision. That tells me that you've unable to come to a unanimous decision on everything. And if you guys are confused, then I think people in that room should have been like, listen, we need to write that we're confused on half of us are confused on the jury notes or the jury instructions. Some of us think this and some of us think that. Can you tell us who's right and who's wrong? I mean, Bev told them to ignore the written instructions if different from what she said. Again, the jurors are going to have to come forward and state all of this. This cannot happen through third parties, friends of friends in text messages, giving stuff to then the defense team to then put it. I mean, it looks bad for Karen Reed. I'm sorry, but I think it looks bad. Lally has changed this into saying, and he's able to do it because this is not your letters that you guys wrote us are complete opposite of these affidavits. And so these jurors are, after reading, it says this came out on Friday. The jurors are hopefully going to have some time here to look at it, right? And then say to themselves, wait a second, hold on. The only time that we had disagreements is when those letters were being put in. Corrective verdict only apply if something was misspelled, according to Andrea. Well, I would have a huge problem with this. These letters, I have a huge problem with these letters. And Lally is using them. Lally is using them to prove his point. The note did not suggest, for example, that the jury were merely having trouble making a decision or needed further instructions from the judge. And then he's citing a case, all right? Given the 4 days of deliberation, the jury indicated that they had carefully reviewed all of the evidence and that their divergent opinions were premised upon deeply held moral convictions. The court was left with no reason or no reasonable alternative other than to declare a mistrial. Further consultation with counsel would not have produced any fruitful alternatives, nor was there a reasonable probability the jury would have consented to deliberate further, particularly when the jury wrote, to continue to deliberate would be fruitful or futile and would only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. Now, read this to yourself again. He is citing a case right here. And this is the exact language that was used, okay? So given the 4 days of the jury indicated they had carefully reviewed the evidence. And how in the world are you going to sit here and tell me that they then use the same language of this case right here, Fuentes? You're going to sit here and tell me that this jury writes a letter that is so simple and so basic on Friday, and then after the weekend, this jury is coming back with notes and letters that have key words that are from fucking case law. Is anybody going to talk about that? Is anybody going to talk about that? Because I am. This is wild. Look it. Divergent, that's the same word. Moral convictions, same words. Same exact language that is written in the jury then notes or letter to the judge that come who looked this shit up? Who looked this up? Who on that jury looked up this stuff? To continue to deliberate would be and only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. Moreover, whether counsel initiates contact with a discharged juror by first sending notice to the opposing party with the substance of the proposed communication, or if the juror initiates contact with counsel as alleged in the defendant's motion, counsel may communicate with jurors only about permissible subjects. Yeah, Sherry D. Yeah, mode. Yeah, see. That dang form. Yes. You guys, the letter on Friday was so basic and so simple that it's like, okay. Then the 2 letters that were then sent on Monday were so friggin' lawyerish. They were not laymanish. They were not written from lay people. They just weren't. And here's the case. And he's just taking this case law and literally citing it. And the words are the same. Give me a break. Get out of here. Oh, shit. So again, now Lally's saying, moreover, like, you're only allowed to talk about some stuff. Permissible subjects include counsel's performance. So I could hit the jury and be like, hey, how did you think I performed? Or extraneous influence on the jury's deliberation or a juror's bias towards a defendant. And then citing case law. Neither of that was the case. And so it is improper for counsel to inquire with jurors or through intermediaries the individual or collective thought process of the jury, the reasons for their decision, or the substance of their deliberations. Nobody is talking. Massachusetts continues to adhere to common law principles barring inquiring into the contents of jury deliberations and any impeachment of jury verdicts based on information gained from such inappropriate inquiry. Tiny Dancer says, y'all, this is the most insane case ever. Similarly, it would be improper for the court to inquire through affidavits or an evidentiary hearing the substance of the jury's deliberations. Now, guys, we don't want to know. Alan Jackson's going to oral argue and say, we don't want to know what they talked about, okay? We want to know about these people were saying that they were planned to be heard, right? That this all happened abruptly and that it was like she just read our letter and said, I'm not going to have you guys do that, talking about morally, compromising them. Because Bev was like, I've never seen a letter like this. No shit, Bev. You never saw 2 letters back to back like that. Very interesting, huh? Even Bev caught it. And so she's like, I'm not going to have you do that. And therefore I'm declaring a mistrial, right? And so the jury never spoke. And so it wouldn't be talking about what they were deliberating if the question was asked, what were you planning on saying if given the chance to speak? How is that talking about what they were deliberating, like what they were talking about? This was what was already planned to be said. So is there a way that can be argued? I don't want to know what you guys were discussing. I want to know, you guys had already discussed it because you guys had already put the letter in, right? 2 letters. So, and there had to be a plan because y'all were thinking that you guys were going to get talked to, or at least the foreman's going to be able to speak and then say whatever it is that you guys agreed to be said, right? So is that allowed to be inquired? Because it's not about them deliberating. It's about what they had planned to say. Does that make sense? Again, I don't know. I'm just looking at in ways to be creative on how you could possibly get that. I don't know. So now I think this would count. I think this is how you could say it. If after communicating with a juror, an attorney wishes to secure an affidavit from the juror, any such affidavit must focus on extraneous influences. And now this is where I think you can talk about the foreman. If people are willing to come forward from the jury and say that they were influenced by the foreman heavily to let those 2 letters on Monday be written, because guys, this is how we're then going to be able, once we're asking the questions about, okay, count 1. So is it your position that you did not reach a verdict on count 1? We will then say, no, we unanimously decided on count 1. Okay. And that's where we're going to be given the opportunity to be heard. And that's where we're going to say it. Okay. So is that how you would have to argue within your affidavit to make sure that you can be heard? And I think that you're going to have to say something like that, and not say it, but that has to be the truth. That has to be the truth. What should have been that this is what we were planning on happening once the judge talked to us and the foreman was to answer in this capacity, right? And we were influenced to be okay with the language of these letters because this was what was going to be happening when we were asked. And we were influenced that it was only, those letters only pertained to count 2. So that's the only way that I would think that that's going to fly. And not the substance of, so it's not the substance of the jury deliberations or the individual or collective thought processes of the jury or the jury as a whole. And that doesn't have anything to do with thought processes. That has to do with, we're writing a letter for the purpose to be able to be heard, right? The Supreme Judicial Court has instructed that whenever a judge asks individual jurors about the possibility of extraneous influences on the jury deliberations, whether of jurors who are sitting or still sitting as such, or jurors who have been discharged, the purpose of the individual voir dire is not to devolve into the jurors' deliberations. There should not be inquiry into a juror's or individual or the jury's collective thought processes. Likewise, so polling the jury on the various possible verdicts during their deliberations or after their discharge would constitute an unwarranted and unwise intrusion into the, and that's not what I would argue. Like, this has nothing to do about the jury being polled, guys. This has to do about why the hell do those letters come out? And if they make this about the jury being polled, they're making a huge mistake. They are. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. This is not about the jury being polled. This is about why were there 2 letters on Monday that were put out that were misleading to the courts? And why? And what was their plan if everyone's in agreement that counts 1 and 3 were off the table, then why wasn't that communicated to? And since you can't ask him that, then you should ask him, you're going to have to go with that people were influenced to allow those letters to be produced because they had issues with that. Because based on what Lally's saying, there's certain things that you can't even do. So obviously he says for the foregoing reasons, the defendant's motion should be denied. As there was no verdict. For the foregoing reasons, the defendant's motion should be denied. As there was no verdict that acquits the defendant, no grounds for the court or counsel to inquire into the deliberative process of a discharged jury. The defendant consented to the mistrial, and the court properly declared a mistrial due to a deadlocked jury. But the jury never said that they were deadlocked, who was at an impasse due to their starkly divided perspectives on the evidence and their sincere adherence to individual principles and moral convictions. Whoever wrote that letter knew exactly what they were doing. Sorry. As such, retrial is not barred by double jeopardy or constitutionally principles, and the Commonwealth may retry the defendant on the 3 and any appropriate lessers. Oh. They're going to have to come with some jury tampering. You look at these affidavits, I mean, like, so this right here, Turtle Boy did a nice little write-up too, because he's calling them out too. You guys, the jury, this has to be handled by those people that were in that room. There is only one way to fix this, and it's going to take like when people come forward, same reason that for people to be retried. The jurors are going to have to come forward, and they're going to have to speak to the courts. Like, I applaud them for not going to the media, because maybe they're in that group text, and if they truly have a group text, and I mean, this could get so messy, but they're going to have to say, this has to do with those 2 letters. I'm telling you, this has to do with all 3. Every communication that they had with the courts is the problem. And then there was a certain way she was doing things, and then on that last letter, she didn't do it the same way that she had always been doing it. And she called the jury in and then read, and then just, I'm not going to have you guys do that, and dismissed. Is this your guys' stance? Like, what is up, Heather? One double to see in here. What is up, Heather? Scorpio, all the mods in chat. What is good? I heard that the foreman was the 5th juror to come forward and say, yep, it was unanimous. Counts 1 and 3 were out, but he was the ex-cop, and that he was one of the guilty votes for manslaughter, or one of the lessers or whatever. So the whole jury felt very intimidated by Higgins. I think that's a problem when, I don't know if that was a typo, okay? But I mean, how do you keep all these characters straight? I feel like the foreman wrote that letter, not even showing what he wrote. If that comes out, I mean, something about those letters has to come out. We're on it over here at Truth and Transparency. The same wording was used in those letters that was used in precedent case law. Okay. I just, what a coincidence. We're talking key words of the same. But I'm sorry, there is unexcusable for the, I don't care. It is unexcusable for those jurors to allow those 2 letters on Monday to ever leave that room. Unexcusable. Unexcusable. Those letters that's not the truth. How did they leave that room? Like, what the fuck? Jesus. You guys, those letters say that they don't, yeah, we can't come to an agreement on anything. That's what those letters say. Yes, Karen. So how do those letters leave that jury room? I'm so confused. I'm confused. I'm not confused. I'm disappointed. I'm like pissed. There's no sense of confusion here for me. Truly, there's not. Truly is for the win. There's a sense of what the fuck. Period. Just doesn't add up. And I will literally fall over in my chair if one of these jurors comes forward and said, that's what I was crying about. I was crying about that letter. I will die. I will literally die, because now that would be a reason I'd be pissed. Because let's say that we just said, okay, hey, we're going to all in vote that this letter goes forward, say aye. Okay. Everybody agrees here that majority wins. If we got 10 people that say, then we're turning this letter in. Okay. But if those reports are accurate that a juror was crying, I think she was crying about this damn letter. These letters being turned in. Don't you think anybody in there raised their hand or said, hey, that letter makes it seem like we haven't decided anything? Because we're not even putting the word verdict on it anymore. We're not even putting the word, like, it's just like, we haven't decided anything. Have you ever thought to run the case law against Lally's response and count the similarities? Justin says, Bev's instructions clearly stated, do not let anybody know where you stand on your deliberations, including me, until you are done. Well, they were done deliberating. That's the whole point. We're done deliberating. This is where we're at. You don't say, what she meant by that is you don't say like we're leaning towards this or we're leaning towards that or we're at a 6-5, we got 2 people not voting, what this is, they were done. Like, don't let me know anything until you're done deliberating. Well, we're done deliberating and we are unable to reach a verdict, a unanimous verdict. Go back to that first letter is everything. This letter. This would have been, in my opinion, after murder 1, obviously, and murder 3 are off the table, right? It's counts 1 and counts 3 are off the table. Okay, boom. I'm writing to inform you on behalf of the jury that despite our exhaustive review of the evidence and our diligent consideration of all disputed evidence, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict. That tells me, okay, that they were under the impression that they had to have all the counts in order to render a verdict. Is that understand? This letter is everything. And so that would mean this letter came on Friday. This is a normal letter. This is a normal letter. And I believe that the defense dropped the ball a little bit with this letter to say, okay, I noticed that they said a unanimous verdict. Can we get some clarification on this? Do they have, out of the charges, do they have any? Are they unanimous with any of the charges? Like, you want, in your cases, you want to put the ball in the judge's court as much as possible for them to say things so that you could then appeal it. That's preserving so many ways to appeal something. And I've only learned this from my pro se ways. Like, I've had to learn it the hard way. But this makes it seem like a normal person just wrote it. Okay. But that they are unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Well, there's 3 different counts here. So thank you. It should say yes. I'm writing to inform you that on behalf of the jury, we have been unable to reach a unanimous verdict on count 2. Counts 1 and 3, we've reached a unanimous verdict. We have not disclosed what we have come to the conclusion of. We are simply saying that at the end of our deliberations, this is where we are at. Open-ended questions, yes. Open-ended questions are the key to couples working out their arguments. Now, ask yourselves how on Friday at 12:15, somebody's writing letters like this, and that on Monday, somebody is writing letters like this. This type of language. This type of language. Get out of here. Absolutely get out of here. And this doesn't even, you guys want to talk about that, hey, we were told not to like say anything. Well, then they totally blew up Bev's. Like, I can't even give you that, because look at what this letter says. Some members of the jury firmly believe that the evidence surpasses the burden of proof establishing the elements of the charges beyond reasonable doubt. Conversely, others find the evidence fails to meet this standard and does not sufficiently establish the necessary elements of the charges. It is plural. Charges is plural of the charge, not charges. I'm telling you guys, I think all holy hell is about to break loose, because charges. So then people are out there saying, hey, we couldn't say anything. Well, this letter says the complete opposite. Charges. And then someone's going to say, yeah, charges, that's count too, because there was the lessers included. So there were those charges. Thank you. Exactly. There you go, MD. Boom. And that's going to have to be said. But how this letter looks, it's not specific. Like, this is just wild. Oh, what? They had an obligation. Hell yeah, they have to just report. I'm saying that the jury now has a huge decision to make. And that decision is, you guys took an oath. And now for that oath, you're going to have to make some moves otherwise, I believe that this is not going to, like, they're going to have to come with something else. This is sad. It's just sad. Ridiculous. No one asked for clarity. Amen. Thank you. That's what I've been saying since day one. How could you have all of those people in that room and no one just says, guys, why aren't we asking for some clarity here? Like, and then you're actually writing in your guys' letters and acting like you didn't need to be, that we were not confused here, but yet you're writing in your letters that you're not confused. The deeply division is not due to a lack of effort or diligence. Diligence. You know what the word diligence is? Where is it at? Diligence. Your due diligence. You know what due diligence is? Your diligence is to ask questions. That's your diligence, or your diligence. So again, I'm telling you, whoever wrote this letter has a lot of fun. Like, I want someone to come forward and I want to know if this was wrote together, if this person just wrote it all himself. But diligence means that if you did your due diligence, you did ask the questions. Do all you can. And they're saying that they did. We asked, like, you shouldn't be writing stuff like this, but rather a sincere adherence. And this is everything that Lally is able to use in his arguments are in these fucking letters. Think about if these letters didn't exist. And if the letter only said stuff like this the 3 different times. Every letter, like, just like this. This is what we wrote. This is what we wrote. This is what we wrote. I believe that somebody went home and looked up some case law. I'm sorry. Nobody just wrote this letter in a matter of 2 minutes, by the way, either. So they were very, like, when anyone wants to go out there and say, well, why is Lana nitpicking? Now you want to be nitpicking words. Abso-fucking-lutely, because that's what this motion is hanging on. It's hanging on words. So you better nitpick these words. Because that's what the law is about. Law is all about nitpicking everything. technicality this. And so you're damn right because nobody wrote this letter in 2 minutes. Nobody wrote this letter in 20 minutes, in my opinion. But saying that the deep division is not due to a lack of effort. Effort, that's like 10th place gets a fucking ribbon, man. There's your effort. 10th place ribbons. Or diligence. Due diligence. Look up what that means. But rather a sincere adherence to our individual principles. Excuse me? And moral convictions. Which they're basically saying, even reasonable doubt, we cannot go over our moral convictions. To continue to deliberate would be futile and only serve to force us to compromise those deeply held beliefs. And he knew that by writing that last sentence, he is reminding big old Bev about that you can't, that's against mass law. You can't force somebody against their own moral compass. This is fucking sick. Yep. Well, that's going to have to be proven that happened. Multiple people are going to have to talk about that. It says shall, not may. Every lawyer ever. Law literally about words. 100%. That foreman, I guarantee, ran that jury room and used his profession of former police officer and doctor to do so. I just want to hear about if people said, if people had problems with these letters, because I would have had problems with these letters. I think anybody that's watching this channel right now would have a problem with this letter. And you should. You should. Because, and then to sit here and say that this type of a letter is going to go, hey, we're going to put this letter out there, and then guess what's going to happen, guys? Then we're going to go out there, and then she's going to ask us about it. And then when she asks us about it, I'm going to say, oh, we've come to the conclusion on this count and this count, but not that count. Well, then why aren't you just saying it just like you said all this shit? If you said all this shit, why aren't you saying it in the letter? So anybody out there wants to say like they were just following Bev's rules or orders and saying that don't tell me anything until you get a verdict, then none of this shit should have been said. None of it. So the jury can't have it both ways. And it looks really, really bad. But in a good way, I think that somebody will step up. I do. And all it takes is one. Take one juror to march their happy ass in there and do something about it. And say that, no, I was influenced that if we put this letter out there, that we were then going to be able to be pulled. We were then going to be able to speak. And it was going to come out then that we decided on count 1 and 3, that they were tossed way even before we wrote Friday's note, and that we were only at an impasse on count 2 and the lessers. And if anybody comes forward and says that, 100%, then shit will happen. But that's what's going to take, is somebody's going to have to come forward and say exactly that there was influences in that jury deliberating room about the letters that got sent to the judge. You fucking say that, you're golden. But you should only be saying that if that's the truth. If that's the truth, it needs to come out. Because taking one look at the letter on Friday and then taking a look at the 2 letters on Monday, somebody did a little bit of homework over the weekend is all I'm saying. Somebody looked up some shit. What type of language to use. And it was straight from case law. But that's going to conclude this. Remember, Sandra Birchmore, she had a Zoom hearing. I'm going to be talking about that. I wanted to keep it separate, but it obviously has to do with the Karen Read case in a way, because everything, the Karen Read movement, I think the ball and the pressure got put on the places that it needed to be put on. So thank you there. Great, smart coverage today. Young, Black, economics, voodoo, economist, justice for Sandra Birchmore. Absolutely. I think some things happened with Turtle Boy's case in terms of that he's going to be able to get his Rule 17 and the Bill of Particulars. I think that has already started. So, but again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you again for the super chats. Those of you guys that became members, Nancy, you're rocking. Scott, it was such a pleasure to meet you. Miss Cat, I think I missed this one. Lana, did you see Turtle Boy's post confirming the foreman was a guilty vote? I saw that because he couldn't get past the glass embedded in John's shirt. Yep. And you know what sucks is that the testimony was actually the opposite. Enjoy a famous grub chuck sandwich, WB. And then YBE, thank you for your new membership. And like I said, Nancy's always bringing it over here. Love her dearly and her support. Susan says, Scott, senior from Ohio, totally agreed. You guys are great. But yeah, I'm not too happy with the jurors allowing those letters to go in. I'm just really disappointed. I had a problem with them when we saw them, and I'm having a bigger problem with them now that Lally is literally using them. Roger, don't take anything for granted. Absolutely. Sherry D, what's good, baby girl? Let me get some cowbell. Cheers. God. Who turned green because of Sherry, baby? Oh, yeah. If you turn green because of Sherry, show her some love. Shake it. Yo, bro, we out.